A black woman helps a millionaire fix his broken car. When he sees the ring on her finger, he freezes. Shocked. Speechless. No one remembered her name. No one even saw her anymore. But on that scorching afternoon, as the sun beat down like punishment from the heavens, she became the only lifeline for a man who once had the world bowing at his feet. A luxury car Maserati sat stalled on a forgotten road, its hood smoking. Thomas Weber, a powerful executive known for closing impossible deals and crushing boardroom battles, found himself utterly powerless. He slammed his fist against the steering wheel, his frustration boiling over. He checked his platinum watch. 11:43 a.m. In exactly 17 minutes, he was supposed to present the biggest pitch of his career. Investors were waiting, the kind that could make or break his company's future. Sweat dripped from his forehead onto his silk shirt as he stepped out and popped the hood. A thick, suffocating cloud of steam hissed upward. He recoiled instinctively. "Damn it," he muttered, yanking his tie loose. His tailored $3,000 Italian suit wasn't made for roadside emergencies. And he couldn't fix a toaster, let alone a high-performance engine. The irony stung. This titan of industry, helpless in front of a hunk of overheated metal. Then, a sound broke the silence. A rattling, worn-down pickup truck crept up and stopped a few yards away. From it stepped a woman, her jeans stained with grease, a plaid shirt rolled at the sleeves, and curly hair tied back in a no-nonsense bun. Her skin glistened in the ruthless sun. "Need some help?" she asked, her voice calm but firm as she approached. Thomas gave her a quick glance, half irritation, half disbelief. "I've got a meeting in 15 minutes, he replied tersely. "My assistant's supposed to send someone, but of course there's no signal out here." She didn't flinch at his tone or his status. Without waiting, she leaned into the engine as if a Maserati was just another Monday problem. "It's the cooling system," she diagnosed confidently. "I can patch it up enough to get you into the city. But you won't have long before it overheats again." Thomas studied her face, trying to read her. "Are you sure?" "I'm a mechanic," she replied without blinking. "I've got a shop 10 miles from here." Before he could say another word, she was already at her truck, grabbing her tools. Every movement was sharp, focused, efficient. She worked with the steady rhythm of someone who knew her craft inside out. Her hands, though small, had the strength of someone who built things from the inside out. 5 more minutes and you would have blown the engine," she said, still focused on her work. "These models are powerful but surprisingly delicate. Like some people." He caught the subtext, but let it slide. His mind was on the clock. "How do you know so much about luxury cars?" "Working in." He cut himself off, catching the prejudice behind the question before it fully escaped. "In a forgotten village?" she said, turning to look at him over her shoulder. "I read. I study. I care about my work. Excellence isn't owned by big cities, Mr. Weber." The mention of his name caught him off guard. "How do you know who I am?" She shrugged, closing the hood. "Your picture's in the business section of the paper. A lot. That should get you to the city," she added. Thomas exhaled, genuinely relieved. "I owe you one," he said, pulling a few crisp bills from his wallet. "Please, take this." She reached out to take it. That's when he saw it. The ring. An antique silver ring with a blue sapphire. Delicate, almost out of place on such hard-working hands. But unmistakable. The world stopped. His breath caught. A memory slammed into him. A little girl with bright, expressive eyes. A promise whispered beneath a leafy tree. A silver ring passed between hands too young to understand time. His mother's last gift. The one thing he swore he'd protect. "Where did you get that ring?" he asked, his voice cracking. The question lingered in the heavy air. She closed her fingers slowly, shielding it. "It was my mother's," she replied. Her voice was steady, but her eyes had sharpened. "Why?" What she didn't know was that 20 years ago, that very ring had been slipped onto her tiny finger by a boy who swore he'd return. A boy who became the man standing before her now. A man who forgot everything. Maya's eyes narrowed. She took the money, pocketed it without a word, and turned back toward her truck. "If the car breaks down again," she said over her shoulder, "my shop's 10 miles out. First right after the Aurora City sign." Thomas stood there, torn. That meeting, that pitch, or this moment? "That ring," he began. "You've got a meeting, Mr. Weber?" Maya cut in sharply. "Your investors are waiting." And then she was gone. As the Maserati vanished into the horizon, Maya stood motionless beside her truck, brushing a thumb over the ring, a habit born of 2 decades. Her voice barely a whisper. "He didn't recognize me. He still doesn't see me." Back at Hope Mechanical, Maya worked furiously on a dismantled engine, pouring her tension into every wrench and twist. "You're going to crack that carburetor in half," her uncle Xavier said, approaching cautiously. He was tall, quiet, hair graying at the temples. The only person alive who knew her full story. "He showed up," Maya said, not looking up, "with a broken car, just like before." Xavier froze. "Thomas Weber? The boy who said he'd return?" "The man who didn't," Maya replied coldly. "He looked right at me and saw a nobody. He saw the ring, but not the girl who kept it for 20 years. That night, she opened a wooden box hidden under her bed. Inside were newspaper clippings, all about Thomas, his rise to fame, his corporate philanthropy, his engagement to Elise Harrington, heiress to a fashion fortune. "Tomorrow, he won't even remember the ring," she said aloud to no one. But she was wrong. The next morning, a quiet sedan pulled up outside the workshop. Thomas stepped out. No designer suit, no watch, just a man searching for answers. "We're not open," Maya said coolly, not moving from her spot. "I'm not here for repairs," he replied. "I came to return something." He held out his hand. In his palm lay a small carved wooden brooch, a bird with outstretched wings. Maya's chest tightened. That brooch, her first sculpture, a gift she'd given him the day he left the orphanage. "Open Heart Orphanage," Thomas said softly. "Orion section. You were the girl who taught me how to carve when everyone else just laughed at me." "You promised you'd come back," Maya said, the words escaping like air from a punctured balloon. "I tried," he whispered, "but my father had other plans." From the shadows of the workshop, Xavier stepped forward, watching silently, judging the man who had returned after 2 decades. "So, the young prince returns," he commented in a low voice. 20 years later, Thomas held his gaze. "I understand your mistrust, but I came to ask for a chance to explain. Xavier rescued me when I left the orphanage," Maya explained. "He taught me everything I know, gave me a home when no one else would. Something I promised to do," Thomas acknowledged, the regret visible in his expression. "Why now?" Maya challenged. "After all this time?" Thomas took a deep breath. "In 3 weeks, I'll officially announce my engagement to a woman I don't love, take over the presidency of a company I secretly detest, and complete my transformation into the man my father always demanded I be." He paused significantly. "And then I saw you. Or rather, I saw the ring. And something stirred." Thomas's phone rang insistently. The screen lit up. "Elise, 6th call." "She seems persistent," Maya observed bitterly. "My jailer," he replied, hanging up. "Our marriage is a corporate merger disguised as romance." "And what do you expect from me?" Maya asked, crossing her arms. "Absolution for abandoning you?" "Answers," he said simply. "And maybe a chance to correct the biggest mistake of my life." What Thomas didn't reveal was the investigation he had begun the night before. A thorough search into Maya Oliveira, her past in the orphanage, and the mysterious disappearance of documents related to the property that once belonged to her family. What Maya concealed was the file hidden in the back of her workshop. Yellowed papers bearing the Weber Enterprises logo, signed by Thomas's father. They detailed the fraudulent acquisition of the Olivia family's land. The very land where the new corporate complex that would define Thomas's legacy now stood. As they stared at each other, neither realized that their destinies were tied by more than childhood memories. A conspiracy had destroyed a family to build an empire. And in 3 weeks, When Thomas was supposed to seal his future, Maya would finally reveal the truth that could tear down everything the Weber family had built on injustice and lies. 3 days had passed since the unexpected reunion. Thomas had canceled meetings and delegated responsibilities, immersing himself obsessively in old files. Something didn't sit right in his father's story about the land now used for the new Weber business complex. At the family mansion, while searching his father's office, he found a locked folder labeled Project Aurora, the same name as the town where Maya lived. Using the key he had secretly copied years ago, Thomas opened it and felt his blood run cold. Contracts, lawsuits, and one particularly disturbing document, a forged death certificate for Maya's mother. He faked her death, Thomas muttered in disbelief, just to get the land. At the same time, in Xavier's workshop, Maya was making her own decision. She had carried the truth in silence for too long. "I'm going to confront him," she declared, revealing the hidden file to Xavier. "The documents are authentic. His father's signature is on all of them." "It's dangerous," Xavier warned. "The Webers destroyed your family once. They can do worse now." Maya caressed the sapphire ring. "I have nothing left to lose." That night, as Thomas drove his sedan toward the workshop, his phone buzzed with a message from Maya. "Central Square. 20 minutes. Come alone." The square in Aurora City was deserted when Thomas arrived. Maya was already waiting, seated on a bench beneath a leafy tree, eerily similar to the one at the orphanage where they had first met. "For 20 years, I wondered why my mother abandoned me." Maya began without preamble. "Why I lost everything in an instant." "Maya, I've discovered something terrible," Thomas said, interrupting her. His eyes reflected genuine horror. "My father. Your father faked my mother's death," she finished, handing him a bundle of yellowed papers. "Then he threatened her life if she tried to get me back. Also, he could take our land. Land with the largest reserve of fresh water in the region." Thomas paled as he examined the documents. The signature was unmistakable, the same one he had seen minutes earlier in his own discovery. "How did you get these?" he asked, his voice trembling. "My mother left them with Xavier before she disappeared. He waited until I was old enough to understand." Maya pulled out an old photograph. "This is my mother, Amelia Aoa. She didn't abandon me. She was forced to disappear." The photo showed a woman with a gentle face, wearing the same sapphire ring. In the background stretched a green valley, now transformed into concrete and steel, proudly bearing the Weber logo. "Tomorrow, I'm going to make everything public," Maya announced. At the groundbreaking ceremony for the new complex, Thomas stared at her, stunned. "There will be hundreds of reporters, investors, politicians." "Exactly," Maya confirmed. "The perfect moment to reveal that the Weber empire was built on fraud, extortion, and destroyed lives." Thomas's phone rang insistently. His father, for the 5th time in a row. He ignored the call. "There's more," Maya continued. "I have reason to believe my mother is still alive." This revelation hit Thomas like a bolt of lightning. "How? Where?" "Her last communication came 8 years ago. An anonymous letter. But the handwriting was hers," Maya said, hesitating. "From a psychiatric clinic in New Hope." Thomas took a deep breath, making a decision that would change everything. "Don't wait until tomorrow," he said, locking eyes with her, his tone charged with urgency. "Let's go. Now." "Where?" "To the inauguration. My father moved the event up to tonight. He's afraid of leaks about the project. No one knows except the inner circle." In the limousine on the way to the complex, Thomas laid out his plan. "I have full access to the security system and the stage. I can put you in position at the exact moment to confront him publicly." What Thomas didn't say was that he had also discovered the exact location of Maya's mother. Not in a clinic, but on a private Weber property, held as collateral for Ernesto's silence. The event was lavish. The business and political elite admired the imposing complex, built on what had once been the Oliveira family home. Ernesto Weber, impeccable in his suit, smiled for the cameras, his authority unquestionable. "Thomas, finally!" he exclaimed when he saw his son. His eyes hardened when he noticed Maya beside him. "What is she doing here?" "A special guest, father," Thomas replied coldly. "Someone with a fascinating story about the origins of this land." Ernesto paled. "My office." Now, in his luxurious office, overlooking the devastated valley, the Weber patriarch stared at Maya with contempt. "How much?" he asked dryly. "What's your price for disappearing, like your mother should have done?" "My mother?" Maya replied, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling in her chest. "I want to know where she is." Ernesto laughed, a humorless sound. "After all these years, she probably doesn't even remember you." "She's alive then," Thomas concluded, discreetly recording the conversation on his phone. "You've kept her prisoner for 20 years. Prisoner. Ernesto dismissed the word with disdain. "I gave her a life of luxury, in exchange for a piece of worthless land. It was a deal. A deal made under threat is no deal," a new voice interjected. At the door stood Xavier, and beside him, an older woman whose eyes, identical to Maya's, overflowed with decades of contained pain. "Mother," Maya whispered, her voice breaking. Amelia Oliveira stepped forward slowly, her gaze locked on the daughter she hadn't seen since she was a child. "Maya," she said softly, her voice catching with emotion. Behind them in the hallway, Elise stood silently, her phone raised, recording everything. Her face unreadable, her attention focused on every word exchanged. The reunion between mother and daughter was about to expose not only the fraud behind the Weber empire, but also the cruelty, manipulation, and ambition that had destroyed families and rewritten destinies. A truth not even all the money in the world could bury. And while Ernesto Weber watched his empire of lies begin to crumble, an even more devastating truth still remained hidden. Thomas was not his biological son, but an orphan, adopted to replace the baby his wife had lost. A final twist. One that, when revealed, would complete the cycle of justice started by a determined mechanic with a sapphire ring on her finger. Ernesto Weber's office pulsed with tension as mother and daughter stood face to face for the first time in 20 years. The once commanding patriarch seemed visibly shaken, his grip on control slipping. "Impossible," he muttered, taking a few steps back. "You were under constant surveillance." "Your money buys silence, Ernesto," Amelia replied, her voice rising. "But not true loyalty. Some guards, they have families, they have hearts." Maya, trembling, stepped toward her mother. 20 years of abandonment, 20 years of silence, of wondering, of aching. When they embraced, no words were needed. Only tears, raw and unfiltered, that said everything they couldn't. Thomas stood frozen, watching the moment unfold. A storm of disbelief, guilt, and heartbreak crossing his face. "Why, father?" he asked at last. "Why destroy a family for a piece of land?" "That land was never just a piece of land," Ernesto said, regaining some composure. "It's the largest reserve of drinking water in the region. It's worth billions. The future of this company. And that justifies destroying lives?" Thomas's voice cracked with disdain. "How do you live with that?" A dangerous gleam crossed Ernesto's eyes. "The same way I justified adopting an orphan to replace the son I lost." The silence that followed was absolute. Thomas staggered, as if struck. "What?" he whispered, the color draining from his face. "You think it's a coincidence that you spent 6 months in that orphanage?" Ernesto laughed bitterly. "Your mother died in childbirth, along with our real son. You were just a convenient replacement. A baby with no problematic medical history, no family to interfere." The revelation hit Thomas like an avalanche. His entire life, his entire identity had been built on a lie. He wasn't a Weber by blood. He was an orphan whose records had been manipulated, just like Maya's. "He's lying," said Elise, finally stepping into the room. In her hands was an old file. "This explains why I always felt something was wrong with our corporate merger." "What have you done?" Ernesto asked, turning pale at the sight of the file. "Proper research before a business marriage," she replied coldly, "including your complete history of fraudulent adoptions." She held up the file. "You didn't just adopt Thomas. There were others." Xavier stepped forward and placed a steady hand on Thomas's shoulder. "This means that you and Maya," Elise continued, her voice softer now, "you're not just childhood friends." She looked from Thomas to Maya. "You're half-siblings. Same mother." Documents were forged to hide the connection. Thomas and Maya looked at each other. The truth now reflected clearly in their identical eyes. Same shade. Same shape. How had no one seen it before? "That's why the ring meant so much to both of you," Amelia murmured. "It was our family heirloom. I gave it to Thomas before Ernesto took him away. Made him believe it was a gift from the mother he never knew." At that moment, police sirens echoed in the distance, drawing closer with every second. "This ends now," Thomas said, his voice steady, rising with newfound strength. "All the lies, all the manipulation." The following week, headlines exploded across every major outlet. Ernesto Weber arrested for fraud, kidnapping, and document forgery. Weber empire crumbles under decades of corruption. The story shook the nation. Thomas, now known to be the true son of Amelia Oliveira, renounced the Weber name and embraced his real identity. The land, once stolen, was legally returned to the Olivia family. The massive corporate development was halted and transformed into a protected environmental reserve, complete with a community center that would benefit hundreds of families across the region. 6 months later, in the newly expanded and modernized Esperanca Mechanica workshop, Maya leaned over a car engine, adjusting a valve with practiced ease. Nearby, Thomas sat at a desk reviewing documents for the newly formed Olivia Foundation for Abandoned Children. "Is it still strange?" Maya asked, wiping grease from her hands. "To find out that your whole life was built on a lie?" Thomas looked up and smiled. A real smile, warm and unforced, the kind he rarely showed in his former life. "Strange, yes," he said, "but also liberating." He touched the small bird brooch he now wore as a pendant. "We lost 20 years, he said, "but we regained our truth, our family." Amelia entered the workshop carrying 3 glasses of lemonade. Her eyes, once worn down by decades of sadness, now sparkled with the quiet peace of someone who had finally seen justice served. "The ring," she said, noticing that Maya still wore it. "It always kept us connected, even when we didn't know it." Sometimes the most elaborate lies are undone by the simplest of ties. A ring passed from mother to son, then to a sister who never even knew she existed. And sometimes, empires built on injustice don't crumble under the weight of guilt, but under the unshakable force of truth, the kind that resurfaces when least expected. If this story about family ties buried under decades of lies touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us that truth, no matter how painful, has the power to heal wounds once thought permanent and reconnect lives torn apart by greed and power.